the idea that the Muslims had some kind of relationship to terrorism only becomes a popular thing in English Anglophone policy discourse in the mid 1980s. And if you look back at, and I've done this, if you look back at the use of terms like Islamic terrorism, or the invention of the term the Islamist, which of course is supposed to be the bad Muslims who take their faith as a guide to political action. These are terms which only appeared in the 1980s. And in fact, if you look back at the first time when there was a big public showing for the idea of Islamic terrorism, it was at a conference in 1984 in Washington, D.C., by an organization called the Jonathan Institute, which, as I'm sure you will be aware, was named after an Israeli military officer who was killed in the Entebbe raid in 1976, and who was, of course, the brother of Benjamin Netanyahu. And it was Netanyahu himself who organized this conference. And that conference, they had for the first time, they'd had a conference previously in Jerusalem in 1980, no mention of Islamic terrorism. In 1984, they have Bernard Lewis, the doyen of Islamophobic writers, the British former military intelligence guy, who wrote books on Orientalism, etc. And him and three of his mates come to this conference in DC, and they present the idea that the biggest threat now is not the Soviets, it's the Muslims. And that's an idea which then percolates through the security establishment of the US, of the UK, helped along by the involvement in the security establishment in the US, in particular of neoconservatives, of Zionist neoconservatives. And that then becomes part of the logic and the rhetoric of US power, and indeed of UK power as well. So it's that encouragement of the idea, and it doesn't emerge until, as I said, until the 1980s. And then, of course, most of us think of it in terms of what happened after 9/11. We think of the assault on Muslims after 9/11, but that wasn't the origin of it. The origin of it was back in the 1980s, and that's where this comes from. Now, does that mean it's a bad play for them? No. Well, the way you portrayed it there, it sounds like it. But of course, they have to also justify what they're doing. And
Right.
As millions and millions of people can now see, it's a genocide. And they have to try and find a way to justify it. And they're failing in that effort, but they still have to try.
So you're saying that the Islamophobia narrative and that our big problem are the Muslims actually is the brainchild of Benjamin Netanyahu
He
from the
curated
80s?
it, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he's been continuing it and perpetrating it.